Okay, for today's video, we are reviewing the Safari Ltd Carnegie Collection Carnotaurus. This is a figure that I recently got in a lot that was pretty expensive. Pretty much the main reason I bought the lot was for this figure, and it's really hard to get, and it's pretty expensive, so that's why I was willing to pay for the lot. The lot was almost $100, but this figure itself normally costs about $100, if not more, so that's why I was willing to pay that much, because it's just such an amazing figure that's so hard to get now that pretty much now you've just got to pay the prices that it's listed at if you want to get it. And this is a very popular dinosaur that has been featured in stuff like the Jurassic World series and has been in a lot of video games. So Carnotaurus just becoming a super popular dinosaur, a super cool dinosaur, so it makes sense for such an awesome figure that's been retired to be getting pretty hard to get and pretty expensive. Yeah, well, now we'll just get into the animal information. And there's a lot. I did a lot of research for this video. It took a lot of time to get all just the research done for this video, so this probably will be a longer review, but let's just get right into the animal information. So Carnotaurus was an abelisaur that lived in the late Cretaceous in South America, in Argentina, in the La Colonia Formation, where it was likely the apex predator and possibly hunted Saltasaurus. Both were found in Argentina at around the same time, but in different formations, so there is a chance that they would have lived together, but we don't know directly that they lived together in the same formation. But since they lived in formations that were close to each other at around the same time, there is a possibility that they would have lived with each other. But like I said, they haven't been found in the exact same formation yet. And abelisaurs were present throughout the Cretaceous time period, but usually weren't the apex predator in their environment, since they lived with the larger Carcharodontosaurids. And it would almost be like a coyote with bears today, where they're a predator, but just not the top predator. But after the Carcharodontosaurs went extinct, the apex predator role was open, and the abelisaurs took their place as apex predators. So this means that Carnotaurus, probably direct ancestors, probably lived with dinosaurs like Giganotosaurus and Mapusaurus, which were both also found in Argentina. Also, during the late Cretaceous in the southern hemisphere, the apex predators were normally the abelisaurs, while in the northern hemisphere, the apex predators were normally the tyrannosaurs, causing some people to call abelisaurs the tyrannosaurs of the south. However, this is right to an extent, but wrong to another extent. Because as far as their role in the environment, both being the apex predators in their environment and both having smaller arms for a larger theropod, it is an accurate thing to call them the abelisaur or the tyrannosaurs of the south. But as far as classification, you couldn't be more wrong. Because abelisaurs descend from a way more primitive group of theropods, while tyrannosaurs are coelurosaurs, meaning that tyrannosaurs are more closely related to birds than abelisaurs. And as far as classification for Carnotaurus is an abelisaur, like I said, related to other abelisaurs like Majungasaurus. And abelisaurs descended from theropods like the ceratosaurs, like Ceratosaurus. And like most abelisaurs, Carnotaurus had very short arms, and probably had little to no function, and a shorter, rounded skull. But one big difference in Carnotaurus and some other abelisaurs were the two large horns. And most abelisaurs, we believe, would have had like these large scale bumps, almost like scutes. But I don't know if they would technically be scutes, but I know they would be large scale bumps on most of them. And yeah, now we'll just get into the figure itself. So obviously, this is a really, really awesome figure. It just looks amazing. So yeah, first off, this figure is just absolutely beautiful. Everything from the pose to the colors. This is just such an amazing figure that your eyes are like just completely drawn to it. When this figure is sitting on a shelf, your eyes just instantly go towards this figure. It's just beautiful. And the condition on mine, it was in a lot that was slightly used. It's still in really good shape, but I will show off some of the spots where you can tell that this figure has had a little bit of use. So on the horns themselves, you can see a little bit of wear. And then on some of like the bumps on the back, you can see some chippage. And then I think the legs have warped a little over time. Nothing that severe though, definitely worth it for the price I paid, but still, you can tell that this figure has been slightly used. And one thing that a bunch of people have talked about on this figure is the red on the face, because some people say it looks more like just colors that would have been on the animal, and then some say it looks like this animal's recently been like eating or something, and that's why the teeth almost look like they've got like a bloody look to them. Either way, I don't really care a ton. I don't have an issue with the red on the face, and I'm fine with it being used as either. I don't really know which of the two I would say I think. I mean, just because it is this was marketed as a toy, I'd say it's more just that was supposed to be the colors on the face, but I definitely think it does look like it could have been an animal just eating something as well. But as far as the other colors too, the back and stuff with these like goldenish, tannish splotches on the back just looks beautiful. And we'll go over a few of the sort of inaccuracy nitpick type things. The scale bumps have had some controversy throughout the years with if you know, the Carnotaurus that was discovered possibly had the skin impressions or the skin itself, but it got thrown away because the paleontologists that discovered it just didn't care for the skin. But then there's a possibility that was also just part of like the ground there, so we're not 100% sure what it was. But if it was, we would know more about the skin, obviously. So there's been debate as to whether or not there would be scale bumps, as far as like the size of the scale bumps or the pattern, if there was a pattern at all. And at the time that this figure was made, I definitely think it was the right decision to go with this style. But I believe the most widely held belief right now is the scale bumps were like not in a set pattern, but more like scattered throughout the body. And this one just has a bunch of scale bumps throughout. I mean, they definitely kind of look like they're in a pattern, but then again, they in some parts look kind of random. So I'm very fine with this as far as the accuracy, as far as the scale bumps. And one other inaccuracy, the tail should be a little bit thicker for sure, just because we know Carnotaurus would have had a really wide tail. And Carnotaurus was originally considered to be a more lightly built theropod, but some more recent studies have like put it as a not so thin theropod, though. But I think this one is like a really good in between the two like sides, and it is a really well sized one considering like some of the more recent figures that have come out of Carnotaurus. The PNSO one looks even thinner than this figure, and then we have ones like the Collecte one which look way bulkier. So I think this is a really good middle, making this a really good medium. And I don't know which of the three I would consider the most accurate, but since this is a good in the middle one, you can't really go wrong with somewhere in the middle. So I'm definitely fine with the bulkiness of this figure. Because while it does look thin, it actually does have a nice little bit of bulk in the middle, like around the stomach area. And obviously one inaccuracy that I do have to mention is the tail being on the ground. But, if you don't have the tail on the ground, you're either going to have oversized feet or you're just not going to get a super interesting pose or whatever. So I'm fine with the tail being on the ground, even though I know it's not accurate. And as far as like the inaccuracies that I've said, for the time that this figure was made, really, I don't think there's really any major inaccuracies, if any at all, other than the tail being on the ground. And for it to be over 10 years, it is still a fairly accurate figure. And the scale for this figure specifically is at 130. There was a smaller one that I'm not exactly sure of the scale. Almost everybody I've heard talk about it says that it is a 140, but then one of the little pamphlets I have says it's 150, even though I do think it's a 140 scale figure. I mean, here it is. This was the old Safari Ltd Carnegie collection Carnotaurus. As you all can obviously tell, this is a massive, massive upgrade. There's a reason why this figure is so plentiful and easy to get, while this one is so expensive and hard to get. One thing that's obviously wrong with this figure, the head size is way too big, because, the body of this figure is way smaller, but the head size for this figure is almost the exact same size as that one. This figure is just a massive improvement, though. I know I've said that already, but, just look at them. It's obvious. This figure just does not look as good. This figure's kind of gotten clowned upon in the Carnegie series, but it honestly kind of deserves it if we're being completely real. It's one of the worst Carnegie figures, and that's why it was so desperately needing an upgrade, and I'm so glad that they ended up making an upgrade for it. And I'll compare it to some other Carnotaurus figures. So obviously, like I've said, this figure far surpasses the old Safari Ltd Carnegie collection figure. But there's some other good Carnegie figures. Honestly, that's the old Carnotaurus. The old Carnegie Carnotaurus is probably the worst Carnotaurus figure I have in my collection. We'll go with probably the next worst one I have, the Schleich little mini-esque Carnotaurus. Honestly, not a horrible figure, especially not for Schleich standards, but a very boxy head, and we know Carnotaurus would have had a thinner head, but definitely prefer this one to this blue one. But definitely for Schleich, I don't hate that figure. I actually really like that one for Schleich. And then we have the Safari Ltd Tube Carnotaurus, which is obviously kind of a little small figure. Based off this one, but honestly I think looks better than that one for a tube figure especially. And then we've got two of my favorite Carnotaurus figures that I've got. The Pterobibitat one, which honestly, as far as accuracy, probably is right up there with this one. But I do prefer this one, obviously, for the colors and size and everything. But this one is a really good Carnotaurus figure, and definitely not that expensive, so definitely would recommend getting that one if you can, if you can't get the Carnegie one. And we have the Papo one, which has been one of my favorites for a while, but definitely I like the Carnegie one even better. And that's saying a lot, because this has been one of my favorites in my collection for a while. But I do prefer the Carnegie one to this one. A little over dramatic on like some of the scales and stuff on the Papo one, but still an awesome figure nonetheless. But I do prefer the Carnegie one. And I really think this might be the best I think it is the best Carnotaurus I have for sure, but I think this might be just one of the best Carnotauruses ever made and currently made. And it's not just a great Carnegie figure, but one of just the best figures. Honestly, through all the praise I've given this figure, it's really not that surprising for me because, like I've said multiple times, the last few years that the Carnegie line was produced are some of the best figures I think that have ever been made and have still ever been made. But we have gotten some good recent some other good recent figures of Carnotaurus, but like the PNSO, the updated Safari, and the updated Collect Day one. But I still think this is one of the best by far. And not just one of the best Carnotaurus figures, but also one of the best Carnegie collection figures, because I've recently reviewed some of the other Carnegie collection figures that were like some of the more recently retired ones, like the Cryolophosaurus and the Concavenator, two other really great figures that were in the Carnegie line that were some of the last ones made and retired. But I still think that this is one of the best of the best. And now we'll go over some of the documentaries Carnotaurus is featured in. Carnotaurus was featured in Prehistoric Planet, which shows off the possibility of the arm use, and it also appears in some other documentaries like Bizarre Dinosaurs, which I don't believe I've seen, but I think it's very outdated. And it's also appeared in some other paleo media, like some movies like Disney's Dinosaur as like the main villain dinosaur, which it is inaccurate, but it was nice to see Disney go with a dinosaur other than Tyrannosaurus as its main villain dinosaur. And it's also obviously appeared in the Jurassic World series, like I already mentioned. And now we'll go over the featured figures. So obviously this is the Safari Ltd Carnegie Collection Carnotaurus, the more recent one that came out around 2010-ish. The old Safari Ltd Carnegie Collection Carnotaurus, the Safari Ltd Tube Carnotaurus, Pterobibitat Carnotaurus, Schleich smaller series Carnotaurus, the Papo Carnotaurus, the Schleich Majungasaurus, the Safari Ltd Carnegie Collection Giganotosaurus. This figure does not scale with this one. This one is in the normal 140 scale line, so this one actually scales better with this one compared to that one. But still, Carnotaurus was a really good sized dinosaur, just not as big as Giganotosaurus. And then this is the Safari Ltd Carnegie Collection Albertosaurus. This is the Safari Ltd Ceratosaurus. The Safari Ltd Carnegie Collection Saltasaurus. The Safari Ltd Carnegie Collection Cryolophosaurus, and the Safari Ltd Carnegie Collection Concavenator. I think I did forget to mention one thing in the annual information thing, so I'm going to mention it right here really quick. So, oh yeah, I did. So like I was saying about the Abelisaurus having the shorter arms and the rounded skull and stuff, I forgot to mention that Carnotaurus was actually a fairly good sized theropod, but definitely not one of the biggest at around 8 meters. But it was still one of the larger Abelisaurs, though. I did forget to mention that little thing, but it's really not that big of an important detail. But we'll get into the conclusion now. And in conclusion, I really think this is an absolutely amazing figure that we'll try to get him more in focus for the end here. I really think this is a absolutely amazing figure to represent Carnotaurus, and while it is pretty expensive now, it is definitely a great figure, so I would definitely recommend getting it if you can. And I hope you all enjoyed this video. I did a lot of research for this video, so if you enjoyed it, I would really appreciate a like, and if you aren't already subscribed, I would really appreciate you subscribing. But yeah, once again, thank you all so much for watching, and like I said, I really hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you can get this Carnegie Collection Carnotaurus, I would definitely recommend getting it. And I think I am out.